today. I think we have our second webinar that is a partnership between academic researchers and researchers in the CG as a result of some of the matchmaking efforts that SPIA did over the last several months. So I believe, is it Hardy who's going to go ahead and get us kicked off?
Yes, but first Emily will give an introduction to the
project. Emily is going to start us out. Okay, Emily, go ahead and take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. My name is Emily Uma. I work for ILRI and I'm based in Uganda. So the genesis of this study that Hardy will be presenting shortly comes from the SPIA matchmaking event that was held last year in Nairobi. So the study focuses on one of the impact evaluation studies under Sapling, a 1CG initiative. And Sapling is an initiative that focuses on sustainable animal productivity for improving livelihoods, nutrition, and gender inclusion. So the study specifically focuses on one of the work packages, work package 2, which really looks at livestock-derived foods as part of diverse diets, looking at how livestock production translates into healthier and diverse diets. So from the SPIA matchmaking event, a collaboration with the University of Alicante was established through one of the professors there, Teresa Molina, who's in the call, and also through the PhD student, Hadi Ahmed, who will be giving the presentation. So Hadi is now very well oriented with ILRI. He holds an ILRI graduate fellowship contract. And both Teresa and Hadi have been in Uganda earlier this year. So the study focuses on the impact of a nutrition, a social behavior change communication intervention on nutrition outcomes, specifically for young children and mothers. So what Hadi will be presenting will be more on the background, what he's been able to do in terms of the exploratory study that he did, including some of the intervention arms of the study design as we see it. So he won't focus a lot on the intervention because we're still working out the details of that. So thank you so much. Over to you, Hadi.
Yeah, thanks so much, Emily. Let me try to share my slides. Is this visible? Sorry.
Yeah. Yes, we are seeing it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Hadi Ahmed. I am doing this with Teresa, who is my supervisor here at the University of Alicante, then along with Emily and Niels, who are with ILRI. So like Emily said, we are looking at the impact of gender differentiated interventions. So interventions targeting men and women separately, and how this impacts the health of children and also on their mothers. Now, why is this important and why are we doing this? This is important because despite progress that has been made across most of the developing world in reducing undernutrition, the situation in sub-Saharan Africa has stagnated over the past decades. Now, we see that in the region, about 21% of people are malnourished. Amongst children, 32% of them are stunted and about 17 are underweight. Now, at the end of 2002, more than half of the children, less than 5 years old in the region, also experienced anemia. Now, the roots of undernutrition in sub-Saharan Africa and of course across several other regions starts from pregnancy. It's like that women during pregnancy do not eat meals that are sufficiently nutritious, and then this could affect the health of the women in terms of anemia and in some cases death. But for the children, this sets them off onto the path of malnutrition because of low birth weight and wasting. And then, of course, this would have long-term impacts for them. Long-term impacts range from cognitive skills effects on cognitive, social educational attainment, and social status. So the story here is that children in the region are susceptible to being malnourished, and once they are malnourished, this has long-term impacts on them in terms of the educational attainment and other outcomes. Now, the situation of malnutrition in the region can be explained by several factors, and one of the most important is the lack of animal source diet in foods that are consumed. So in this context, when you look at food eating, you find that people eat a lot of carbohydrates, some fruits and others, but meat consumption is very low. So the problem of malnutrition in the region could also be a problem of protein deficiency. This is explained by the fact that per capita meat consumption in the region from 2019 to 2021 was about 12 kilograms, which is less than the global average, which was about 34 kilograms. Now, the situation in Uganda largely mirrors what happens in sub-Saharan Africa, in that 30% of children are stunted, 9% are underweight, and then 61% experience anemia. Again, like Emily discussed, we did some qualitative studies in the study sites, and then this evidence, the evidence from the focus group discussions and then the key informant interviews show that people or households regularly consume food from other food groups, but animal derived proteins are rarely eaten. This is milk, also about chicken, beef, and eggs. For example, out of the people we spoke to, about less than 15% of the reported animal source food as part of a typical diet in the household. Again, this is again reflected nationally, such that per capita beef consumption in the region, in the whole of Uganda, is about 6 kilograms per person, right? And poultry is actually less than 2 kilograms. So overall, meat consumption by the end of 2019 in the region was about 10 kilograms per person, which is less than a third of the global average. Now, consumption of meat could have wealth dimensions, and that is at least in some parts of the world. But generally, when you look at it, you observe that this is actually mostly regardless of the wealth of the person and whether or not they own livestock. Now, we are considering livestock ownership here because there's this vast literature that explains that. And of course, sorry, if someone has a question, you can stop me on the way so that I can take care of that. Yeah. So generally, livestock ownership, there's this vast literature that explains that when people have livestock, they are more willing to eat this livestock derived foods, and of course would have better nutritional outcomes. In Uganda, what we find is that the end product of malnutrition, which is stunting and underweight and other anthropometric measures, is relatively the same regardless of whether the household owns livestock or not, which is about 30%. Now, when you look at the DHS data, they have the wealth distribution, which is divided into 5 quintiles. When you compare the lowest, that is the poorest group of people, to the median households, malnutrition or stunting only decreases by about 2% from the lowest to the middle quintile. This is again broadly reflected for underweight children, which is about 10%, regardless of whether the household owns livestock or not. And again, when you compare the lowest quintile to the median group in terms of the wealth distribution, the DHS, and undernourished children will only decrease by about 3%. Now, this is not very peculiar to Uganda. This is observed across sub-Saharan Africa, in that a study by Kathleen Brown and co-authors found that 3/4 of undernourished children in sub-Saharan Africa are not found in the poorest 20% of households. And also half of them are not in the poorest 40%. This is significant because you observe that most studies will look at malnutrition and then, of course, provide a wealth dimension to it, which makes a lot of sense. You have a lot of money, you eat a lot of meat, you are more likely to be nutritious. But again, this finds that this might not entirely be the case, and there may be inequalities even within households in terms of how much meat they consume. So what do we do in this study? Primarily, we aim to improve the nutrition of children and women through the implementation of gender differentiated interventions. Now, we note that most studies in this area have mainly focused on providing nutrition knowledge for women, which is, of course, very important. What has been missing here is that we do not find any significant number of studies that have tended to target men. Men are important decision makers in the household, course, they control the resources of the household, and then they decide what should be how much should be consumed. Right? So giving men knowledge of nutrition could, of course, help them in allocating household resources towards animal source diets. Again, like I said earlier, there is limited evidence on the impact of nutrition knowledge of men on the outcomes of their children. So this is also one of the motivations why we target men in addition to women for this intervention. So specifically what we do is that first, at the beginning, so at the baseline survey, we intend to measure nutrition knowledge among men and women. So what do they think constitutes a nutritional diet? Are they able to identify children that are malnourished? How will they target malnourished children? And then, of course, how do they relate to VHTs to be able to take care of children that are perceived to be malnourished? We also look at the prevalence of social norms. So we are looking at practices within households, practices outside the house, practices in the communities that tend to limit the availability of animal source diets to household members, more especially to children and also to women. After this, we design and implement the intervention that would target nutrition knowledge and social norms, these two factors. So first, we have a baseline treatment. This is a baseline treatment such that all women in our treatment, all women in our sample will receive this baseline treatment. And what we do is to deliver a nutrition knowledge for them. This is very similar to what the community health workers or the VHTs in the case of Uganda would provide during a normal routine visit to the household, talk about nutrition. Again, there have been several cities that have delivered these similar interventions, and even more specifically in Uganda. So we're able to do this. Now, for the second arm, or what we call the arm one, that is, of course, it's a similar nutrition intervention. That's like we give to the women, but we deliver this for the men. So we deliver nutrition intervention for men, targeting their nutrition knowledge. Again, we hope this would guide them towards allocating more resources for household consumption. In the second arm, we deliver again. We tend to tackle these norms, social norms, which I would explain later what exactly these norms are. We tend to address these norms such that men and both women are able to recognize certain practices within households, certain practices within outside their households that tend to limit the consumption of animal source foods for their family members. At the end of this role, we evaluate the impact of these interventions on the nutritional outcomes of children and women. We also look at behavioral changes in men and also, of course, in women. Behavioral changes such that we are looking at are men more willing to eat at home after the intervention and things like that. And of course, at the household level, we would also evaluate intermediate outcomes here to be able to find mechanisms to explain our results. So our study here is related to two strands of literature. We are most related to studies that tend to evaluate the impact of knowledge-based interventions on nutrition of children and women, and these have mostly focused on nutrition knowledge. For instance, the study by Mohozi and co-authors in 2017 in Uganda uses VHTs to provide nutrition knowledge, among other interventions to women. Now, what they find here is that while, of course, there's no change in the anthropometric measures of children, they experience better development outcomes. Now, this study is very similar. This intervention is very similar to what we would provide for our baseline treatment. That is what all the women would have. Also, there have been studies that have looked at infant and child feeding practices, more specifically and interesting for us. The study is a study by Kabehenda and co-authors in 2011. This was again in Uganda, where they used provided information on child feeding practices for lactating mothers. And what they found was that this led to better outcomes for the children. Again, very few studies have looked at the impact of male interventions on outcomes of women and also on their children. Some of these have looked at antenatal care, especially mostly in India, facility births again in India and I think in Bangladesh, and the impact of micronutrient intake on the health of the children that were born. Now, more recently, some studies have found no effect at all or at least very small effect as compared to male interventions on child health. In Uganda, Yokman and Cortes in 2017 found that very similar interventions targeted at both men and women led to more significant effects for women as compared to men. They tried to find ways to explain these results, and again, later in the presentation, this would motivate how we design our intervention. So I would return to this. Now, we contribute to this in two key ways, to this picture in two key ways. The first is that there is evidence that even in the presence of nutrition knowledge among women, this tends to have a limited impact on nutrition on itself. So there is this disconnect between providing the knowledge for women and then this impacting the nutrition of women and children. Why? This is mostly because, of course, absence of resources and other things, or because there are certain behaviors, even though women know what constitutes a nutritional diet, they know what constitutes malnutrition. Some of the decisions regarding household consumption are not entirely theirs to make. So even though they know this, the transition from knowledge to practice is very limited. And what we contribute here is to go beyond the provision of knowledge, and then we seek to change behaviors relating to intra-household inequalities in food consumption. This is just saying that within households, different members consume differently, even for food that is produced there. So this tends to ensure that men are very well fed, while women and their children are not, right? So we tend to see if it is possible to point this out and change behaviors regarding this application. Also, we contribute to this in that we also target men. Why is this important? Nutrition interventions have mostly, and of course rightly, been targeted at men, but at women. But we know that men control a lot of resources. They mostly control the income in their households, especially more so in the case of Uganda. And also, we do not have enough evidence on the knowledge, how the knowledge of men would affect the health outcomes of other household members. We are also related to the literature on the persistence and effects of negative norms, right? So this includes studies on norms around fertility and female employment. So we are looking at norms around fertility and then what women do once they have children. We also look at norms on female genital cutting. This is mostly in Southern Africa, especially in Ethiopia, and the persistence of dowry payments and early marriage in India and South Asia. For nutrition studies, we also studies in settings where they have strong sun preferences, right? So in settings where you have strong sun preferences, there is a pro-male bias in food allocation, right? This starts very early in life, such that children in India, very infantile in India, are fed for shorter periods as compared to males. Here, in our context, we consider two norms that are very common in Sub-Saharan Africa, which is that men tend to be given the larger share of food that is cooked in the household, and also beyond this, especially in Uganda, in the second case, they also frequent street restaurants that serve animal source food diets. Now, of course, women are not explicitly bad for going to this restaurant, but the social norm surrounding this is that men go there to socialize and eat, so which gives limited access to women and children to these facilities. So the context of this is that we are in Uganda, in East Africa, and then here we focus on two districts in Central Uganda, Mukono and Masaka district, where the dominating group is the Bantu. Again, the ethnic group here is important because most of some of the norms are linked to that, to the ethnic group of the people. The population of the two districts together is about 1 million. Of course, I have to note here that Mukono accounts for a significant majority of this population, with about 200,000 being children below 5 years, who are our target group. We selected this district because, despite high levels of animal source food, livestock ownership, especially pork, they consume very little animal source food. This has meant that there is a high prevalence of malnutrition in children. Again, from the DHS data, this is not representative for the district, but that is, at least for now, the best data available, and this shows that malnutrition is about 2% more stunting, per se. For example, about 2% more than the national average in these two districts. Again, we also consider factors such as the lack of community-based programs targeting nutrition in these districts. So geographically, this is Uganda, and then of course this is the central region, and we are looking at two districts over here. So for context, I think that is Kampala over there. So we have Mukono district here and Masaka. So we are targeting those two districts in central Uganda. Okay, so why are we targeting why are we targeting village? Why are we targeting animal? And why are we targeting social norms? This is based on evidence from a qualitative study we did in the districts, and then what this shows is that we highlighted 3 factors that limit the consumption of animal source foods in these districts. The first is the prevalence of taboos in the districts. Right? So some respondents they cite taboos that have historically limited the availability of animal source foods for mostly women and children, especially pregnant women. So most of these taboos relating to animal source food consumption are mostly targeted at women and children. For children, these taboos include white ants, wild yams, eggs, and some fishes. Most of these are said to be prohibited because people believe that they lead to delayed speech in children. Now, fish is a special case, like that it is not generally a taboo, but children are not fed fish that has a lot of bones. This is the evidence we find in the quantitative study. Now, for women, some of our respondents cite pork, lungfish. Lungfish is actually quite common among most of our respondents. Sheep, again, this was cited by a few of the respondents, and some fishes as taboos for pregnant women. Again, these are perceived to affect either the health of the woman or, of course, the health of their unborn children. Also, older women identify chicken as taboo, right? So this is a residual practice from a very long time where women were not allowed to eat chicken. Of course, this has mostly disappeared. We find that younger women they eat chicken and it's okay. No, the overall conclusion, the overall idea we get from taboos based on our focus group discussions is that these are not as prevalent as they historically were. With less than 10% of the people we spoke to saying they actually adhere to this animal source food of taboos. So again, this could say like maybe, and again, in cases where they actually adhere to these taboos, they have alternative sources of protein to cover for that. So we do not think this could be one of the reasons to explain why people do not eat meat. We also looked at nutrition knowledge. We looked at this in 2 ways. We looked at it as which foods are rich in nutrients, so what constitutes a nutritious diet, and then are they able to identify malnourished children? And if they do, are they able to identify what measures should be taken to be able to treat this child of malnutrition? Here we asked both men and women, and what we do is to provide a picture collage of 4 dishes with different nutritional components, and we asked these people to rank these dishes based on what they think is the most nutritious diet. Now, for men, 27% are able to identify the most nutritious diet. So out of the men we spoke to, 27% correctly identified the most nutritious diet out of the 4. We also showed a picture of a child that is malnourished, and then of course we asked them to identify what they think was wrong with this child. And again, 20% of men were able to identify that the child suffered from kwashiorkor, and then they were able to prefer solutions to it, as well as what they thought caused the child's kwashiorkor. Now, these are very similar for men and women. Nutrition knowledge for men and women in the districts are very similar. Among women, just like amongst men, 27% are able to identify the most nutritious diet. And again, only 21% correctly identify a child that suffers from malnutrition. These are very similar. Results for this. So remember, I said that we had four dishes. So results for the second and the third and the least nutritious diet are even lower, although they are still comparable between males and females. So this points to a big issue. That is that nutrition knowledge amongst both men and women in this research is quite low. Okay. Also, we looked at, we asked what people thought would constitute a nutrient-dense dish, right? And less than 10% of males in the focus group discussion identify meat as part of what they would classify as a nutrient-dense dish. For children, 20% identify eggs. Amongst women, only 5% named meat as part of initial diet, 13% named eggs, and about 25% of them named silverfish. I think I can explain it. Silverfish is quite abundant fish in Uganda. Most people tend not to eat this because there is kind of a perception around it that it's mostly for people that are not very well to do. So while it is very nutritious, people tend not to eat it a lot because of that perception surrounding it. But here, about 25% of women identify silverfish as constituting part of a nutrient dense dish. We also looked at social norms that could limit the availability of animal source foods for household members, especially for women and children. And here we identified two norms. The first is that men tend to frequent pork joints that are located on the streets. Now, let me explain what these are. So in Kampala, in Mukono, and again in Masaka, you find that on the street, there's this street restaurant. They sell mostly roasted pork meats, and then people tend to go there just to socialize. So you see a lot of men there. They socialize. Sometimes they watch football just to socialize. So men go to work, then once they close, they frequent these joints, they eat, or sometimes they go there for lunch, and then they go home and eat what the wife has provided. So this tends to create this thing such that the men, of course, who are well malnourished from going to these cocktails, tend not to be very worried about being malnourished because they are very well fed. And then, of course, this could affect how they allocate resources within the household for meat because they have other avenues of eating meat. Now, this is quite an expensive endeavor because out of the people we spoke to, so how much do they think they spend per week at these places? And then the average was about $4 US per week. This might not seem to be a lot, but like in a month, that's about $16, which is quite a lot and could again go into providing animal source diet for the entire household members. The second norm is that women generally tend to share food that is prepared in their house. And then again, this again includes meat, right? So when, let's say chicken, for instance, is prepared at the home, the woman shares it. But they do this based on very strict sharing rules, right? So each household member is traditionally entitled to specific parts of the chicken. So here, most participants in the focus group confirm that men receive the largest share in the most nutritious part of the chicken that is cooked at home. So you're looking at the thighs, the drumsticks, and the other parts. Children, in this case, are generally given the chest bone, the wings, and again, the soup and the skin and the liver. A few respondents, I have to say, here also said because some children were given thighs, but the majority of the children are given these other parts I named earlier. Again, we see this inequality within the household, where the men are given the most nutritious part of the food, and the children are given the least nutritious part within the household. Women eat chicken, and again, of course, until recently they were not allowed to eat this at all, but now they eat it. So based on this qualitative evidence, we designed an approach and an estimation strategy. And here we focus on the two that we think are the most important, that is nutritional knowledge and social norms. Again, this is because taboos, as we have seen, do not seem to be as important as they have been. And even when people have followed these taboos, they have tended to find alternative sources of protein besides these taboos. So we have two main treatment arms plus a baseline. The baseline is what we call the T0, which is a baseline treatment. All women in our sample will receive this baseline treatment. It is only for women and focuses on providing nutrition knowledge, information on causes, effects, and solutions to malnutrition. Again, this is equivalent to what an interaction between a woman and a VHT in their household would look like. So it's very similar to what a VHT would provide they should visit their household to provide information on nutrition. We have the T1, and then households in the T1 will receive the baseline treatment, which is the women's intervention, plus a similar information campaign for men. So we have both men and women in T1 receiving the nutrition knowledge campaign. Then we have the T2. In the T2, all households will have T1, which means that the women in the households will have the nutrition knowledge, the men would have the nutrition knowledge. In addition to this, we'll provide the intervention to change the 2 norms we identified, eating outside the household, and then sharing of animal source foods within the house. And then again, this will target both men and women. Now, we target men because, of course, they tend to be the beneficiaries of this practice. And again, the women are essentially the ones who actually share this food. So we target both of them. We are delivering this intervention for both men and women using 2 different vehicles. For the women, the intervention will be implemented through an NGO who would utilize the village health teams in their communities. This is very similar to the study by Mohozi, who also uses VHs in the communities to deliver the intervention for women. Now, for men, we take a slightly different route. And this is because more recent literature does not find significant difference for male-centered interventions. And one possible explanation for this is the nature of the intervention. So a study by, like I said, by Lockman and cohort in 2017 used very similar interventions for both men and women. So they had classes for men and classes for women, and then they evaluated the impact of this at the end of the intervention. And again, they found that the male intervention did not have a significant effect as they thought it was going to be. And one of the possible reasons for this they gave was that the attendance to these classes was quite low for men. So the men did not attend these classes a lot. So maybe this could explain why the effect was low for men. So what we do here is use role models that were selected by from the focus group discussions and the key informant interviews in the intervention areas. Now, this approach is very similar to the study by Ganatokis and cohort in 2016. And what they do again in Uganda was try to change social norms, perceptions of people regarding HIV amongst women. And what they did, of course, for men, this was targeted at men. And then what they did here was to find role models within communities to lead this intervention, and this led to a significant effect on the changes of perceptions of men towards their wives who were infected with HIV. So from our focus groups, we identified medical personnel in the communities, religious leaders, village leaders, and older village members. So we aim to use these groups of people as the delivery mechanism for the intervention that targets men.
Heidi, I'd just like to give you a reminder about time. I know we got started a bit late, but if you could try to wrap up within the coming 5 minutes.
Okay, all right, thank you. So in the design, we conduct a cluster randomized control trial in both districts. We will randomly select a village. The village is what we call a cluster, which should again be assigned to one of our 2 treatment arms or the baseline treatment. Masaka, for instance, has about 600 villages, and we have currently developing the sampling frame, and we have about 11,000 eligible households for Masaka. Mokono has 450 villages, but with a larger population, and we are still working on the eligible households. The inclusion criteria here is households, which constitute a man and a woman with livestock who have at least 1 child that is less than 5 years old. The selected household will obtain data for the woman, the male partner of the woman, and again at least 1 child in the household that is less than 5 years. So for this, to find a minimum impact, we use the dietary diversity score of children as our outcome of interest. This was done for 2 reasons, because it is very easy to modify this within the period of study, and also it requires the largest sample size of all our outcomes. So given the sample size of this, we'll have enough power to evaluate the effects for the other outcomes that we use. To be able to measure a minimum detectable evidence of 10 percentage points, we need 569 mother-child per study arm. Now, the sample is divided into 240 clusters in 2 districts with 80 clusters, and then we have 7 households per cluster. This will translate into 1,707 households across the 2 districts. So this is how it's designed at the household level. 1/3 of the household will receive the information for women. Another third will receive the information for women and the men. And then the last third of the household will receive the information campaign for men, information campaign for women, and then the norms intervention, which is for both men and for women. Okay. So at Endline, we use this Anchor model to follow the effects. And then again, we are looking at the effect of T1. That is the intervention that targets both men and women relative to the T0 outcome, which targets only women. And then we are looking at the effects of T2, again, the intervention that targets men and women, and also in addition, it has the social norm component. We use fixed effects, that is the strata level fixed effect. This, for now, will just be at the village level. Now, standard errors are clustered at the village level. Outcomes of interest. So we are looking at outcomes at both the household level and also at the individual level. For the household level, we are looking at the dietary diversity score and consumption of animal source food. For pregnant women and the mothers, we are looking at dietary diversity score, consumption of the animal source food, and anthropometric measures such as the BMI of the mother. For children, we are looking at the dietary diversity score again, the animal source consumption. We're also looking at anthropometric measures such as stunting, wasting, and reported illnesses within a period of, I think, about 2 weeks at the time of the intervention. We will look at outcomes for men and women that are not mothers in this case. We look at the consumption of animal source food, knowledge of nutrition, perception of individual and communal social norms. And then for the men, we look at whether they eat outside the household. Maybe as possible mechanisms, we also look at household expenditure on food and on food. And we'll look at the bargaining power outcomes within the household and basis of the ages in the community. So we are done now, but so for now, this is what we have done, and what we intend to do next is to finish with the sampling frame we are currently developing. We've also submitted documents for the IRB and IREC applications, and we are waiting for the approval. By June, probably, I think, we intend to have the rollout of the baseline, and then the intervention should start by late summer, at least in the fall, which will run for about 9 to 12 months. And then the end line, we think we should be able to start the end line by June of next year. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Heidi, and good to see you. I'll be chairing the Q&A. So the floor is open for questions, comments, reactions. And while people are thinking of their questions and comments, let me start with one. On the norms interventions, can you say a little bit more in terms of how you are going to be able to separate what is a norm versus what is information or additional information?
Yes. So essentially, both interventions are information campaigns. We are providing information campaigns both. The first information campaign we are providing is to alter nutrition knowledge. So this will just be knowledge on nutrition. So what constitutes malnutrition, and then how do they think, how can you treat malnutrition? The second, again, is an information campaign specifically targeting the 2 norms. So probably you eat outside the home, maybe is that an alternative way such that wherever you are eating could be passed on to your children and your wives at home. So again, they're essentially both information campaigns, but the second one is specifically targeted at these 2 norms. The issue right now is that we do not have a clear idea of what these interventions would look like. So it gets quite difficult trying to separate what essentially these 2, what would differentiate the 2 interventions. Yeah.
Okay, so but I guess maybe then it would be interesting to hear from you how you're going to figure this out, like in terms of what's the path going forward in terms of kind of figuring out what that intervention would look like.
Yes, that's true. Thank you. I don't know if Emily can take this because
yeah, maybe I can just say something. Thanks so much, Karen, for that question. Yeah, so for one of our work packages that focuses on gender, we have a GTA intervention, a gender transformative intervention. So we want to also include the nutrition-related norms as part of that package. So the focus is more around how to change the mindset around those beliefs. But in terms of actually how it would look like, we are still in discussions with the potential partner. Yeah. So sorry, we can't give more than that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Let me, other people, anybody wants to ask questions, just raise your hands or come in through the chat. Or give any other signal. Can you also just jump in if you want to. Kyle, go ahead. Kyle?
Yeah, thanks. I guess just one suggestion with the baseline survey. Can't hear me? Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Okay, sorry, my audio was messed up there. I guess just one suggestion when you're thinking about the baseline survey and your theory of change involves information to different household members. I think it's going to be really important to collect detailed information on prior beliefs, what people are and aren't aware of, so you understand at baseline, who you're moving the needle for, in addition to how information is shared within the household, because I think there's potentially frictions within the household, and that is going to be really important when we're thinking about these types of gender differences.
Thank you, Carl, for the suggestion. So we have in the questionnaire, so for the first part, information on beliefs within household members, we have in the questionnaire a section that targets this, beliefs of both the man and the woman within the household regarding how food should be shared within the members, regarding who gets what in the household, regarding eating outside. The second on information dynamics in the household, we haven't really looked at this much, so I think we'll discuss this further. Thank you so much. This is helpful.
One other thought is, in addition to beliefs, you might want to, I think there's some literature on precision of beliefs and whether people have more dispersed or more precise prior beliefs. And there are some survey methods to get at that. And I think that's worth looking into because that's also going to matter. Whoever's got more dispersed beliefs may be updating a bit faster.
Yeah, thank you. Again, in the questionnaire, so when we ask for beliefs, we ask two sets of questions on belief. We have a question on what they generally believe and what they think the entire community believes. So we have that. So we have their general perception and then what the perception is of the community, what they think the perception of the community is. So I think maybe we could be able to do something around there regarding the dispersion of beliefs. Yeah, no, thank you.
As nobody else is jumping in, let me, two questions around kind of what I understood to be the idea of targeting the kind of the influencers, the leaders, community health workers, etc. The first one is I'm not entirely sure I understood how you were going to target, like what's the intervention. So it's not one of your variations. It sounds like you're doing that possibly only in the norm or in the norm and the information. So clarifying that would be helpful. But also, given that the places you will work look like urban or semi-urban places, I guess, do you know enough about who are the local influencers and how the information flows or doesn't flow in order to know who to target? Because it's not your typical village setting. So two separate questions.
Yes. Thank you, Karen. So the first question, the community, the interventions. So when the intervention has to do with women, so for both the T0 and the T2, the component of the T2 that targets women, the VHS would would deliver that. For the components that have to do with men, so the T1 component with men, and the T2 component, the nutrition change component with men, this would also be delivered by the community, by the role models. So depending on the gender, we would have either the VHs delivering the message or the community leaders delivering this message. Now, yes, this is true, especially Mokono is quite urbanized. Yeah, and I have to admit, this hasn't come up in discussions, so I probably would have to talk to Teresa and everyone else on how to handle the second part. Yeah, thank you very much.
Guy, you want to come in?
So, hi everyone. So this is Teresa. So, I think one information that we can give actually is so regarding the question. So we discuss about this a lot because we have two types of agents, in interventions. One of them is actually one of them is the role models. Yes, I want to turn on the camera. So one of them is are the role models who are going to target the men, because when we did the focus group and we were there and doing the qualitative interviews, we learned that they don't have any relation. I mean, they don't get information from the community health workers, usually the male, okay, in these settings. So it's very difficult to have a meeting with community health workers and the men. So we have from the focus group some information on who are the people who they trust more. Okay, and I think Hardy can give you better than I do the statistics on that, but we have some figures about that in these settings in Mukono and Masaka, and these are the starting points, okay, from where we will start. For women, there's two possibilities. The easiest one is to work with the community health workers because of the village health teams, because these are the people with whom they are doing these interventions in Uganda, and we want to work with them. I think this is the best way to proceed, because this is going to be the baseline intervention. They are the one delivering information. So we think that the proper way to go is to do an intervention that is that has external validity, right? And that in that way, using this village health team, it will be the convenient way to go. Of course, we have that variation that is going to be a gender variation. Okay? It's not based on treatment. Okay, information, the same information is going to be delivered by a different agent depending on the gender. Okay, so we were discussing, Hardy and I, whether in the end line we may have some, questions trying to elicit whether difference in who deliver the message can have an effect or not. But we have to think about that. We may think about that for the end line. But at this point, we think that after doing the qualitative work in the field and talking to the people in the districts, what makes sense to deliver the information is to have these different two different like models, or two different focus points, entry points.
But just clarification, so then the norm part of it, who will deliver that?
So the for norm part, given that we have to, I mean, for the norm part, it could be also different. I mean, it could be like with information for the woman, it could be the VHT, because the randomization is going to be at the village level. So VHT, we can give them a component of the norm part, and it can deliver that part as well. And for the men, it could be the focal point, because if not, we have to get in another role model for woman. And this is another component. You are mute, Karen.
Sorry, I thought I clicked it. Maybe I misunderstand something, but it's worth just worth thinking through. So it sounds to me that what you're doing in your final treatment is both multiplying the number of messengers and the number of recipients and the type of messages. So there's a lot of different changes there. So trying to figure out what of all of these can you simplify. Sounds like a good...
Yeah, so that is why we didn't want to mix up the number of people. So now with the design that we have, okay, the only for women, the main change is that on top of giving information on nutrition, they will receive information on social norms, but the person who delivered that information is the same, doesn't change. And for men,
no, but you have both men and women. So in a village, you have two types of facilitators. And that itself will change even for the men, for the women. Women and men are not separate entities.
Yeah, I know, but if not, we always will have the community health worker for women giving information on nutrition, and then a role model for women giving the social norms intervention, and a role model for men giving the social norms for men, because I guess that for gender, we will need a different...
Srini wants to comment, so let him comment. Srini, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Corinne. I mean, I'm just trying to share some of my experience, especially the extension, the way you provide information to the beneficiaries or in intervention areas. As I'm just building up the discussion, what we are discussing currently, the profile of the person who is delivering the information. We have men and we have a woman group, and then the person who is delivering their profile should be very important to profile them, in fact, before we start giving interventions. Because in our studies, when the men providing intervention or providing extension services to the especially the men is giving extension services to the woman, and they are not really comfortable. Especially the Masaka district, I think it is a little challenging, I guess, like, because of the populations are majorly are Muslim dominated areas. I think I'm trying to understand how you are going to net out the effect of the gender of the person who is actually sending out the information to the women beneficiaries versus men. I'm looking at from the perspective of the person who is actually delivering the information. I'm sure that will have a consequence on the way they deliver and how it is actually being delivered, and how the woman users or woman beneficiaries are going to take it further. So I'm just wondering, like in the design part, the one suggestion is to profiling those people who is actually doing the information delivery to men and women before you start doing the interventions. That could be one suggestions, or the alternative also on the designing part. You can look at the set of the people who is doing the how do you call, the delivering the informations to the set of the group of women farmers versus the men. Maybe you call it as information providers. The people you said something VHS, right? Village health, something like that, right? I forgot the name.
VHS.
Yeah, so you can profile those guys by gender, and also in the design part, can you make it even further a little bit more? I mean, to looking at the more net effect of these guys' interventions as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. So yeah, this could be done. So from the focus group discussions, we asked for the gender of the VHT. So mostly we have 4 VHTs, and then of course we have both male and female VHTs in most of the places we visited. So yeah, I think this is possible. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think we're out of time. If anybody has further thoughts, I'm sure Hardy and Teresa are happy, and Emily are happy to get them by email. Ricardo, Mina, any formalities, administrative announcements to be made?
Not really, thank you.
That was the Mina in black.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for joining us, and see you next time around.